You were standing on the corner of 5th and Main, coffee going cold in your hand when you see it, 60 feet tall, your own face, 40 feet in the air, looking down at the intersection like it owns it. And across the street, frozen mid-step, is the man who once told you that you were past the point of being interesting. He is staring up at you. His mouth is open. And for the first time in 5 years, you watch Fenwick Hale's knees actually buckle. But to understand why a billboard could do that to a grown man, you have to go back. Back to the kitchen where it started. Back to the night he packed 2 suitcases and called it finding himself. You were 40 years old when you married Fenwick Hale, and it felt at the time like the safest decision you had ever made. He was steady. He worked in commercial real estate, wore the same Navy coat every winter, and told you on your 3rd date that he wasn't interested in games. You believed him. For 18 years. You built a life around that belief. A house in a quiet subdivision outside. Columbus, a daughter named Junia who inherited your stubbornness and his jawline, and a rhythm to your days that felt, if not thrilling, at least solid. You gave up your own design studio the year Junia was born. Not because Fenwick asked you to. He never asked for anything directly. That wasn't his style, but because someone needed to be the one who remembered the pediatrician's number and the parent-teacher conferences, and it was easier, in the moment, to let that someone be you. You told yourself you'd go back to it later. Later became a word you used so often it stopped meaning anything. By the time you turned 55, the house had gone quiet in a different way. Junia was in college in Michigan. Fenwick had started working later, showering before dinner instead of after, buying cologne you didn't recognize. You noticed. You are not a woman who fails to notice things, but you told yourself the things women tell themselves when they are afraid of what noticing might cost them. Your best friend, Tilly Vance, noticed too. She'd known you since your 20s, since before Fenwick, since before any of it. She sat across from you at a diner on Route 9 one rainy Tuesday and said, without any warm-up at all, "Corliss, you look like a woman who already knows something she hasn't said out loud yet." You stirred your coffee and didn't answer her. Some part of you was still hoping you were wrong. You weren't wrong. The night it ended, you remember the specific sound of the refrigerator humming, because it was the only sound in the kitchen for almost a full minute after. Fenwick said it. "I need something that still feels alive, Corliss." You remember thinking, "I am 58 years old and my husband just told me." "I feel like something already dead. There's someone else," he said next, like a man confirming a delivery time. "Priya, she's 34. I know how that sounds." "It sounds," you said, and your voice came out steadier than you expected, like a sentence you've rehearsed. He didn't deny it. You asked him later that same week, sitting across from him at the same kitchen table where you'd once picked out paint colors and baby names, why, not why Priya, why now, why after 18 years? "You stopped being interesting a long time ago," Fenwick said. "You stopped wanting things. I need to be around someone who still wants things." You wanted to tell him that you had wanted things. 100 things. 1,000 small things. And that you had folded every one of them into grocery lists and permission slips, and his dry cleaning. Because that was what the marriage had asked of you. But you didn't say that. You just nodded, because some humiliations don't need company to be complete. They only need silence. He moved out 3 weeks later. He took the leather armchair, half the wedding china, and, without ever saying it directly, most of your remaining confidence. The divorce finalized 6 months after that. Fenwick married Priya in a courthouse ceremony 11 months later. Junia went. You didn't ask her not to. You told her, "Go, be there for your father," even though something in your chest cracked clean down the middle when you said it. The first year after the divorce, you did not recognize your own life. You'd moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner on Larchmere, the kind of place you'd have called temporary at 40 and were now calling home at 59, because the house had to be sold and split, and there wasn't much left, after the lawyers took their share of what 18 years of marriage had built. You remember one particular Tuesday in February with total clarity, not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing did. You sat at a small table by the window with a can of soup you hadn't heated yet, watching snow collect on a windowsill that wasn't yours 5 years ago, and you thought, this is what invisible feels like. You applied for jobs. Design jobs, the kind you used to do before Junia was born, before you folded your ambition into someone else's household. Most didn't respond. One interviewer, a man barely older than your daughter, looked at your resume and asked, not unkindly, "So you've been out of the industry since 2006? You said yes. You watched something behind his eyes close gently, like a door someone doesn't want to be rude about shutting. Tilly came by most weeks. She never let you disappear entirely, even when you wanted to. She'd show up with takeout and sit on your second-hand couch and say things like, "You are not what he said you were," and you'd nod. Because you loved her for saying it, even on the nights you didn't fully believe her. There was a particular kind of loneliness in that year that you hadn't expected, not the loneliness of an empty apartment, but the loneliness of being a woman in her late 50s whom the world had quietly stopped looking at. Waitresses called you hun. Men your age dated women Junia's age. You'd walk past storefront windows and catch your reflection and think, when did I start looking like someone's mother instead of someone's future? The lowest point came on a Thursday in April. Junia called to say she wouldn't be able to visit for your birthday because she and her father and Priya were going to Charleston. It's just easier this way. Mom, she said, and you understood in that moment that even your own child had started organizing her life around the version of the family that no longer included you as its center. You hung up the phone and sat on the floor of your kitchen, not crying exactly, just still, the way water gets still right before it either freezes or moves. And in that stillness, something in you finally said, quietly but clearly, I'm done waiting for someone else to notice I still exist. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived with a flyer. Tilly had dragged you against every protest you offered to a community center evening class. Return to design, a workshop for career. Restarts, you went mostly to stop her from asking. You sat in the back row of a fluorescent-lit room with 11 other women, most in their 50s and 60s, and the instructor, a sharp, quietly kind woman named Thessaly Monroe, put up a slide that read, "Your gap is not a wound. It's a body of lived research no 25-year-old designer has." You didn't believe her, not at first, but you kept coming back. By the third week, Thessaly asked to see your old portfolio, the one you hadn't opened in nearly 2 decades, water-stained in the corner from a basement flood years back. You almost said no. Instead, you brought it in a manila envelope, hand slightly unsteady, and set it on her desk like you were handing over something fragile and embarrassing. She went quiet as she flipped through it. Then she looked up and said, "Corliss, this is genuinely good work. Better than good. Why did you stop?" "Life," you said. It was the only word that fit. "Well," she said, "life's about to get interrupted again." She connected you with a small branding studio downtown that was rebuilding its team after losing 2 senior designers. You almost didn't apply. Tilly sat with you while you filled out the form, refusing to let you close the laptop until you hit submit. You got an interview, then a second one. Then, on a gray Wednesday morning that felt entirely ordinary, you got a call from a woman named Delphine Ashworth, the creative director, offering you a position, not entry-level, not an internship, but a senior design role, built around exactly the kind of instinct you'd spent 20 years convinced had gone stale. You cried in your car in the parking lot before you even told anyone, not from joy exactly, from something closer to relief, the specific relief of being seen again, professionally, after years of being reduced to an ex-wife, a mother who no longer had daily use, a woman someone once called uninteresting. The next 3 years reshaped you in ways you couldn't have predicted. From that kitchen floor in April, your work at the studio was good, genuinely, undeniably good. You had an eye that decades of unpaid attention to detail, to fabric, to color, to the specific way light falls in a room at 4 in the afternoon, had sharpened rather than dulled. Delphine noticed. Clients noticed. Within 18 months, you were leading campaigns, not just contributing to them. The real shift came when a small, ambitious skincare company called Verloon approached the studio, looking for a rebrand that spoke to women who'd been underestimated their whole lives and were done with it. You remember sitting in that pitch meeting and feeling something shift in your chest. Recognition maybe, or permission. You didn't just design their new brand identity. You became, at their request, the face of the campaign itself. A 59-year-old woman, unretouched gray at her temples. Photographed not as a before, but as an arrival. The campaign did something none of you fully anticipated. It went beyond regional. Women your age wrote in by the hundreds. Messages that said things like, "I saw myself in that photo for the first time in years." The client extended the contract, then extended the budget. Then 18 months later, decided to put your face on something considerably larger than a magazine spread. You met a man during this time too, a quiet, unhurried photographer named Dashiell Cray, who worked several of the Verlooney shoots and had a habit of noticing things other people rushed past. The same way you did. He didn't rebuild you. You want to be clear about that even now. You'd already rebuilt yourself, brick by uncertain brick, long before he arrived. But he was, without question, the first person in years who looked at you like you were something worth paying attention to, not something that used to be. By the time the Billboard contract was signed, a citywide campaign for Verloon's biggest launch yet, you had stopped being the woman Fenwick left. You had become simply Corliss Ambrose, designer, brand consultant, and, as it turned out unexpectedly, a face people were starting to recognize on the street. You didn't know Fenwick would be there that Tuesday. You didn't plan it, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they're wrong. You were simply crossing 5th and Main on your way to a client meeting, coffee in hand, when you glanced up out of habit. The same habit you'd developed over the past few weeks, half disbelieving every time, to look at your own face, 60 feet tall, looking down over the intersection. And that's when you saw him. Fenwick Hale, 63 now, hair thinner, coat looser on a frame that had clearly lost some of its old confidence. He was standing dead still on the opposite curb, phone forgotten halfway to his ear, staring up at the billboard with an expression you'd never once seen on him. During 18 years of marriage, something between disbelief and grief. He crossed the street. You didn't walk away. You want to be honest? Some small old part of you considered it. But you stood there, coffee in hand, and let him arrive. "Corliss," he said, and your name in his mouth sounded different than it used to, smaller somehow. That's you, up there." "It's me," you said. "I didn't know you were still—" He stopped himself. Still what, Fenwick? Still designing? Still working? Or still around? He didn't answer right away. Up close you could see it, the way 5 years had worn on him differently than they'd worn on you. Priya, you'd heard through Junia, had left 2 years prior for reasons Junia had been vague about. He'd been living, apparently, in a condo near the airport, alone. "You look—" he started and stopped again. "Interesting?" You offered, and you didn't say it cruelly. You said it the way you'd say a fact. You'd waited a long time to be able to say out loud. Something crossed his face. Recognition. Maybe of exactly what he'd once said to you, and exactly how those words had aged in the years since. His eyes went glassy in a way you'd genuinely never witnessed from him before. Not once in 18 years of marriage. "I was wrong," he said, quiet, almost swallowed by the traffic noise around you. "About all of it. I was wrong. You didn't need him to be right about that for your own life to have turned out fine." That was the strangest, most freeing realization of the whole encounter. You didn't need this apology. You'd already built something whole without it. "I know," you said gently, because there was no need for cruelty now, not anymore. "I hope you find your way back to something good, Fenwick. I really do." And you meant it. That was the part that surprised you most. You didn't stay to watch him compose himself. You had a meeting to get to. And for the first time in longer than you could remember, your own life had somewhere it needed you to be. That evening, Ottilie poured 2 glasses of wine on your balcony, a real balcony now, attached to a real apartment you'd chosen entirely for yourself, and asked how it felt, finally, to have him see you like that. You thought about it honestly before answering. "It felt smaller than I expected," you told her. Not because it didn't matter, but because I'd already stopped needing it to. That's the part nobody tells you about power reversals, the ones in movies, in stories, in the daydreams you have on your worst nights. You imagine the moment will feel like triumph, like fireworks, like finally winning. What it actually feels like, when it arrives, is quieter than that. It feels like closing a door you spent years standing in front of, waiting for someone else to shut it for you, and realizing you were capable of closing it yourself the whole time. Dashiell called that night, the way he did most nights now, and asked how your day had gone. You told him. He listened the way he always did, fully, without needing to fix anything. "You know what I think," he said near the end of the call. "I think the billboard was never really the moment you arrived. I think that happened on some Tuesday in a kitchen nobody was watching, a long time before any of us knew your name. You thought about that for a long time after you hung up. You were 59 years old. You have a career you rebuilt with your own hands. A home that belongs entirely to you. A daughter slowly finding her way back into real relationship with you. And a man in your life who sees you exactly as you are, not as who you used to be for someone else. Somewhere across the city, a billboard still hangs 60 feet in the air. But you no longer need it to prove anything to anyone. The truth is simpler than the billboard, simpler than the reversal. Simpler than the moment Fenwick's knees nearly gave out on a street corner in April. The truth is this: you were never uninteresting. You were only unseen. And there is nothing. No marriage, no man, no 18 years of quiet erasure. That gets to decide, forever, whether the rest of your story gets to be seen too.